On Christmas Eve, I came home without warning. I discovered my daughter shivering outside at 32 degrees Fahrenheit, her fragile body trembling in the freezing night. No blanket covered her. No one cared to keep her warm. Inside, my son-in-law's family was laughing loudly, raising their glasses of champagne in front of a roaring fireplace, as if life had never been cruel to anyone. I kicked the door open, clutching my daughter in my arms, and spat out 6 words that cut through the festive music like broken glass. I am glad you are here. Before we go on, do not forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. We bring you new stories every day. Hit like and let us know what city you are watching from in the comments. I stepped out of the taxi, my heavy boots sinking deep into the thick blanket of snow that smothered the path outside my daughter's house in Boise, Idaho. The icy wind slapped my face so sharply it felt like it wanted to peel my skin away, forcing me to yank my coat collar higher. After years as a Taekwondo coach, I thought I could withstand any challenge. I had trained through the suffocating heat of the dojo and endured the harshest winters during international trips. But this Christmas Eve cold had a bite unlike any other, and even I shivered against it. I stood there staring at the warmly lit house, my chest knotted with a strange mix of excitement and anxiety. Tonight I wanted to surprise Kala. I longed to see my little girl's radiant smile when her mom showed up unexpectedly. Months had passed since I last saw her. Now the front yard lay buried under snow, not a single footprint marking its surface, as if no one cared enough to clear a path. Through the big window, I saw a golden glow spilling from the living room. Cheerful Christmas music floated out, playing from a Bluetooth speaker. The song was Jingle Bells, the same tune Kala had adored as a child. I stepped closer, peeking inside. A long table covered with a bright red tablecloth stretched across the room, weighed down with holiday dishes. A golden roasted turkey, steaming cornbread, stuffing a large bowl of cranberry salad, speckled with apple slices and raisins, and glasses of red wine glinting beneath the lights. The Delmere family was all there. Vernon sat with the heavy air of authority, while Corliss sipped her wine with a smug smile pressed to her lips. Neve was chatting near the fireplace, her children laughing nonstop, and Sutton, my son-in-law, was raising his glass, basking in the cozy warmth of the gathering. But where was Kala? I frowned, leaning closer to the window. In my mind, I pictured her happy, smiling, her arms wrapped around my neck as she used to whispering endless stories. Then I heard it, a sound faint, fragile, a whimper. I turned. My heart stopped. There on the porch, under the dim light, and next to a snow-covered poinsettia planter, Kala sat curled up in an old wooden chair. She wore only a thin blouse, her small shoulders shaking uncontrollably. Strands of damp hair clung to her forehead, wet from melted snow. I ran to her, my pulse pounding like a drum. "Kala," I cried, my voice cracking with panic. I yanked off my thick coaching jacket and wrapped it tightly around her. My trembling hands touched her arm. It was ice cold, as though all warmth had drained away. She lifted her face. Her eyes were red, her lips pale, and with the faintest whisper, she breathed Om. The word nearly dissolved into the night air before she collapsed against me. I hugged her close, feeling her body shiver like a bird trapped in a storm. "I am here, sweetheart. I am here," I whispered, forcing my voice steady, even as tears burned in my eyes. I pulled an extra sweater from my bag and wrapped it around her fragile frame, desperate to share what little warmth I had. I lifted her into my arms, Her soaked slippers slipped off, landing in the snow, leaving behind a messy trail of evidence. I held her close, her weak breath brushing against my neck. In that moment, I wanted nothing more than to get her away from the biting cold, from the neglect that had pushed her to this state. But the laughter inside continued sharp and cruel. Through the window, I heard Sutton's deep voice, booming smugly, followed by a wave of loud laughter and the clinking of glasses. They were celebrating cozy by the fire, while my daughter, my own flesh and blood, was left to tremble outside, as if she had no right to be part of that house. Only a few hours earlier, I had been at the Boise airport, still drenched in sweat, after a grueling week coaching the national taekwondo team. The heat of the mats still seemed to cling to me, even as I stood in the chilly brightness of the airport lobby. I dragged my worn suitcase behind me, excitement buzzing so strongly through my body, I could hardly stand still, imagining Calla's face, lighting up the very instant I appeared at the door without warning on Christmas Eve. My heart was pounding fast, full of restless joy and anticipation. She had always been my light, my anchor, ever since she was a tiny girl, clinging tightly to my legs, begging me for one more bedtime story, then slowly blossoming into a sweet young woman whose warm smile could melt away even my hardest days. But my role as head coach had pulled me constantly from place to place: Seattle, national tournaments, quick stops, and stolen weekends with Calla. Every time I packed my bag and left, I whispered to myself, just one more tournament, and then I will stay longer with her. And now at last, I was here ready for a Christmas reunion I believed with all my heart would make her happy. I sat down in the waiting area of the airport, waiting for the short ride that would take me to the quiet suburbs of Boise. Pulling out my phone, I dialed Calla's number. I just wanted to hear her voice, make sure she was home and safe. The phone rang and rang, each tone tightening my nerves like a knot being pulled tighter. No answer. I frowned, telling myself she was probably busy, maybe bustling around the kitchen preparing Christmas dinner with Sutton and his family. I called again, then once more, always the same silence. An uneasy heaviness began to spread through my chest, slow but steady, like ink bleeding across paper. I typed a quick message. Mom's on her way. You home? I stared at the screen, waiting for the small blue check mark to appear. Nothing came. I shook my head, trying to brush away the bad feeling. I told myself she had left her phone in another room, or maybe she was distracted, decorating the Christmas tree the way she loved to do every single year. The plane had landed in Boise after dark, and as I dragged my suitcase outside the airport doors, the winter night's cold slammed into me, seeping straight through my skin. Families gathered everywhere around me, hugging, laughing, calling out to each other, some heading toward midnight mass. A father carried his little girl on his shoulders. She held a red and white candy cane and giggled happily into the air. I watched them, a lump swelling in my throat. I had carried Calla like that too, once upon a time. Held her small hand while we walked through streets glowing with Christmas lights. But tonight, I was alone, dragging a heavy suitcase, stepping into the night with an ache of indescribable loneliness pressing down on me. I raised my arm and flagged a taxi, my voice hoarse with exhaustion, barely carried. Take me to Meadow Creek, 12th Street. The ride moved slowly. The streets were alive with people bundled in coats and scarves, their breath forming mist as they walked toward church. From the distance, faint bells rang, mixing with the gentle rise of a choir singing Silent Night. I leaned against the window, watching the rows of houses with warm glowing lights imagining Calla busy in her kitchen, maybe making the mashed potatoes she had learned from me years ago. At a crowded intersection, the car slowed to a stop. My eyes drifted outside, and there I saw a familiar figure. A group of officers were directing traffic, and among them stood Ellison, one of my former students from my early days teaching Taekwondo at the local community center. He looked taller now, steady in his police uniform, but still had that same open, kind smile I remembered. I rolled the window down quickly and called out Ellison. His head turned, his eyes brightening the instant he recognized me. "Miss Marilla, you are back," he exclaimed, adjusting the brim of his police cap. I smiled, hiding my fatigue as best I could. "Yes, just finished another round of training in Seattle. You still working in Boise?" He nodded, his grin lighting up his whole face. "Yes, traffic cop now. You here for Christmas with your family?" "With Calla." At the sound of my daughter's name, my chest warmed, but then his smile faltered. His face stiffened ever so slightly, and in his eyes flickered something like hesitation, as though he wanted to say more but could not bring himself to. A bad spark caught inside me, like a flame trying to take hold. "What is it, Ellison? Is something wrong?" I asked, my voice lowering. He shook his head too quickly, forcing a smile back onto his face. No, it is nothing, Miss Marilla. I am just glad you are back." But his eyes betrayed him, shadowed with worry. I opened my mouth to press him further, but the traffic light turned green. The taxi surged forward, leaving Ellison standing in the cold, one hand gripping the brim of his cap, tightly watching as we drove away. As we neared Calla's house, I leaned forward and asked the driver to stop a little before the gate. I wanted to surprise them to see her face at the exact moment she found me standing at the door. I grabbed my suitcase and walked slowly along the snow-covered path, my heavy boots sinking deep and leaving a trail of prints behind me. The golden glow radiating from the houses around looked like rows of candles burning brightly in the dark night. From a distance, I thought I heard the sound of a guitar, mixed with singing, drifting out from Calla's living room. I smiled despite the cold, picturing her standing like she used to when she was a child, beside me, eyes sparkling, belting out Winter Wonderland with that clear, fearless voice that always filled me with joy. I set my suitcase down on the step, drew in a long breath to steady myself, and prepared to knock. But then, out of nowhere, a mocking laugh cut through the air, sharp as a blade slicing skin. I froze in place. My hand hovered inches from the door, but did not touch it. Then came Mr. Vernon Delmere's deep, gruff voice, echoing clearly. "That is what they call a daughter-in-law, a woman who cannot even have children, 4 miscarriages already. Have they not humiliated us enough?" His laugh followed heavy, slow dripping with contempt like poison. Then Sutton's voice, colder and crueler than I had ever heard, joined in, always pretending to be depressed, locking herself in her room to do nothing. If it were not for my parents, I would have kicked her out ages ago. Another round of laughter erupted, followed by the clinking of wine glasses raised in toast. I recognized Neve's voice, sharp as a dagger filled with venom. Exactly. Totally useless. A wife who cannot give children. What is she good for? Pretending to be sick just so she gets coddled. Pathetic. Each word stabbed straight into my chest like a knife. I stood paralyzed, my breath caught painfully in my throat. This was how they treated my Calla, my daughter, who once dreamed only of a simple, happy family, who poured her whole heart into preparing every meal for her husband. Now they were mocking her, humiliating her. 4 miscarriages, each one leaving her sobbing, until she could no longer breathe, calling me with a broken voice in the middle of the night. And now they dared to say she was faking it. I clenched my fists until my nails dug into my palms. And then my eyes shifted, and I saw her. Calla curled up in a wooden chair on the porch, dressed in only a thin blouse, her head bowed low, her frail body trembling violently in the freezing cold, my vision blurred with hot tears. My heart nearly stopped beating. I rushed forward and scooped Calla into my arms. Her body shook against me, cold, as if she were carved from ice. My hands trembled too, not only from the bitter Boise night, but from the rage roaring through my chest. Each step I took toward the Delmire's front door felt as though it carried the weight of 1,000 pounds. But I did not stop. I pounded hard on the wooden door, my knocks fierce and unrelenting, drowning out the Christmas music blaring from inside. Jingle bells looped again and again, a cruel mocking soundtrack to the pain I had just witnessed. No one came at first. My teeth ground together, and I banged even harder, as though my fist alone could break the door down. Finally, the door swung open. Corliss stood there, a glass of red wine wobbling in her hand. Her lips, painted a glossy, bright red, shone under the light. The thick smell of alcohol drifted from her as she forced a smile meant to appear polite. "Hey, Miss Marilla, what a surprise," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness, like I was nothing more than an unwelcome guest. "Why did you not let us know so we could roll out the red carpet?" I locked eyes with her, not bothering to hide the fury rising in me. "Let you know," I growled each word, escaping through clenched teeth. "If I had let you know, how would I have seen this? What did you do to my daughter?" I clutched Calla tighter, her faint breath brushing against my shoulder with each fragile exhale. Every breath was a reminder that I would not let this pass. Corliss raised an eyebrow and looked at Calla in my arms with a grimace, as if staring at something that inconvenienced her. "Calla just wanted some fresh air," she said lightly, her tone soft but poisoned with contempt. "Do not make a big deal. It is Christmas. Come inside. Do not stand out there in the cold." Her words struck me like a slap. Fresh air. While my daughter was practically freezing to death in nothing but a blouse. Before I could respond, Sutton appeared behind his mother. His shirt was half-buttoned, his posture deliberate and arrogant. He held a wine bottle loosely in one hand and looked straight at me with open defiance. Mom closed the door. He ordered, his chin raised. "Let her stay out there until she gets over it. Who shows up to Christmas dinner acting fragile just to get out of helping?" He chuckled smugly at his own words, as if he had said something clever. Those words were another blade, stabbing not only me, but also Calla, whose body shrank smaller in my arms, as though she wished she could disappear. From the table inside, Neve's voice rang out again, cutting through the air like acid. "Exactly. A woman who cannot even carry a baby to term. What is she worth? Absolutely useless." Her shrill laugh, mixed with the murmurs of the others, gathered around the table. And then I heard them, Neve's 2 children, running to the porch, their footsteps quick, their eyes wide with curiosity. They looked at Calla, cradled in my arms, then giggled, whispering to each other with childish cruelty, "Aunt Calla is in trouble." Their innocent little voices burned into me like salt ground deep into an open wound. My face flushed hot with rage, my whole body trembling. I rammed my shoulder into the door with all the strength I could muster, then kicked it with my boot so hard the frame rattled. The door flew wide open, slamming against the wall with a thunderous bang that instantly silenced the noisy room. Corliss's wineglass jolted in her hand, crimson liquid sloshing over the rim and staining the expensive rug with thick red blotches. The cheerful Christmas music cut off abruptly, as if someone had yanked the speaker's cord from the wall. The air inside the room shifted suddenly heavy and suffocating, like all the oxygen had been drained away. I stepped into the very center of the Delmere's living room, still clutching Calla tightly in my arms. Each one of my steps left behind a messy trail of melted snow across the polished hardwood floor marks of fury that could never be erased. Every single eye was locked on me. Vernon, his face cold and stern. Corliss, her fake smile wiped away in an instant. Neve, her eyes gleaming with open disdain. The rest of them, a mix of shock, annoyance, and hostility. I felt the weight of their contempt pressing on me from every angle, but I did not care. With careful movements, I settled Calla onto the couch, pulling my scarf from around my neck and draping it gently over her trembling shoulders. Her hands were still icy, her fingers twitching faintly as if the snow's merciless chill still clung to her skin. I knelt close, searching her eyes, trying to pour some of my strength into her fragile frame, even while inside me swirled a storm of fury and anguish. The Delmere's living room remained brightly lit, the fire crackled in the hearth, but the atmosphere was thick and brittle, like everyone inside was holding their breath, waiting for the inevitable explosion. Then Sutton stepped forward, his face flushed red from too much wine, his eyes glowing with arrogance. He lowered his voice, cold but taunting, as though he believed he ruled this house. "You do not get to make a scene in my house, Marilla." He spit out the words, "my house," with deliberate emphasis, reminding me he thought I was nothing but an intruder. He stood tall, his shirt half unbuttoned, one hand resting on his hip in a gesture of pure contempt. Yet in his eyes I caught the faintest flicker of uncertainty. He knew deep down I was not someone who could be intimidated. I shot up to my feet, my arm-raising finger pointed straight at his face. My voice trembled with fury, but cut through the air like steel. "No right. And you think you have the right to throw my daughter out into the freezing cold, to let her nearly freeze to death on your porch." My blood boiled in my head. Every word exploded out of my chest. "Is that what you call a husband? Is that what you call family?" I turned my gaze, sweeping the long banquet table where the plates still steamed, the turkey's golden skin glistened, and the glasses of wine sparkled under the chandelier as if mocking Calla's suffering. Vernon rose slowly from the head of the table, tugging at his suit jacket with deliberate authority. His deep voice rumbled through the silence. "That is enough, Miss Marilla," he said firmly. "This is a family matter. A woman who cannot bear children must learn to endure it. That is simply the way it is." His words struck me like a sledgehammer, brutal and unrelenting. I locked eyes with him, seeing clearly the arrogance of a man who had spent years as a judge, used to commanding a courtroom and controlling lives with a single sentence. But today, he had chosen the wrong opponent. My gaze shifted back to the table, where the roasted turkey's aroma still hung in the air, where the cornbread stuffing sat neatly piled, where the cranberry salad glistened under the lights. And then I looked at Calla, still shivering faintly on the couch, her stomach growling quietly like a desperate, silent accusation. Something in me snapped. My voice erupted sharp and cutting, like a blade tearing cloth. "So you sit here feasting while my daughter lies outside in 32 degrees weather. No coat, no food. That is what you call tradition. That is what you call humanity." Corliss shrugged, her smile icy, like I was blowing things out of proportion. "A woman who cannot have kids, even if she eats well, is nothing but a waste," Corliss said softly, her voice dripping with disdain. She lifted her glass of red wine, took a slow sip, as if to prove she did not care at all about my feelings or about Calla's suffering. Then Neve chimed in from the table, her tone acidic, every syllable rubbing salt into wounds that had not healed. "Your daughter always uses depression as an excuse to avoid work," she sneered. "All this time, has she ever cooked a proper meal for the family? No. All she does is lie in bed whining, dragging everyone down with her misery." She shook her head, her eyes glinting with mockery, as though Calla was nothing more than a burden the entire Delmere family had to carry. Murmurs rose from the relatives around the table, growing louder and more poisonous. Some shook their heads in disapproval, others chuckled, agreeing with those venomous accusations. Every sound, every sidelong glance pierced my chest like another sharp blade. My rage surged so strongly that for a moment I wanted to flip their fancy table over and demand justice for my daughter right then. What would you do if you heard your child being humiliated like this? Would you stay silent or fight back no matter the cost? Share your feelings below in the comments, or just comment number 1 if you understand. But then a faint sound cut through the thick tension, a fragile voice. Calla, my little girl, stirred on the couch. She struggled to sit up, her trembling hands gripping the cushion's edge for support. "I am so tired," she stammered, her voice breaking apart barely more than a whisper. "No one understands." Her words were crushed instantly by Sutton's sharp shout. "Enough," he barked. "Shut up. You have embarrassed me more than enough already." He stepped toward her, his gaze icy, his face contorted, as if he wanted to crush the last ounce of strength she had left. I saw Calla's shoulders slump, her red eyes filling with tears, and my heart twisted painfully. I moved quickly, stepping in front of her, ready to do whatever it would take to protect her. Memories of Calla flooded over me like an avalanche the countless nights she had called me, sobbing, broken by loss. The first miscarriage, the second, the third, the fourth. Each one had shattered another piece of her spirit. She had always been a sweet girl who dreamed of a warm home, of family dinners filled with laughter, of children playing at her side. But pain upon pain had driven her closer to despair. I tried to be there for her, even if only through long-distance calls, holding the phone to my ear while she cried. Yet I never imagined the Delmere family, the ones I had once trusted, would treat my daughter with such cruelty. Sutton, the man I had once believed to be decent, now revealed himself as nothing but a cruel bully. A man who had cast my daughter into the freezing night, treating her like trash. My blood roared. I was seconds away from losing all control. Through the frosted window, I suddenly noticed Ellison standing silently on the porch. Maybe he had been patrolling the neighborhood, maybe drawn by the noise, but his hard gaze and clenched fists told me he had heard, and he had seen. He was a witness. I gave him the faintest nod, signaling him not to step in yet. Still, his presence filled me with a small surge of hope. I was not alone. Someone else knew the truth. Sutton took another deliberate step, pointing his finger straight at me, his voice harsh and stripped of any mask of civility. "I am warning you. This is my house. Stay out of it, or things will get worse." He smirked, drunk with power, convinced I would back down under the Delmere's authority. He was wrong. I clenched my fists until my knuckles cracked, feeling all the rage I had bottled up in my life erupt in that very moment. The air in the room grew so heavy, it felt like a single spark would ignite an inferno. I locked eyes with Sutton, my voice low, but sharp enough to cut glass. "You think you can threaten me. You think you can keep hurting my daughter without consequence. You are wrong, Sutton. Dead wrong. I will not let this go." Then I turned to the entire Delmere family, from Vernon's cold, judgmental stare to Corliss's faint, mocking smirk to Neve's disdainful glare. All of you, I said, my voice echoing across the silent room, you are going to pay for what you have done to Calla. The living room fell into a silence so sharp it was terrifying, like all the air had been sucked out, leaving only the thick weight of an explosion waiting to happen. I placed my hand gently on Calla's shoulder, feeling the frail frame beneath the scarf, my voice steady and unflinching. This is not a private matter anymore. This is domestic abuse. My words dropped heavy, like stones into still water, their ripples spreading through everyone present. Corliss, still clutching her wine glass, let out a shrill laugh, swirling it slowly, like she was savoring a joke. Abuse? She scoffed, her voice coated with sarcasm and arrogance. We are simply teaching her her place. You should thank us for tolerating her this long. Sutton stepped closer again, his eyes red with alcohol and rage. He spat his words as though he chewed each one before throwing it out. She fakes depression. She fakes pain to get out of doing anything. No one is hitting her. We are just sick of her uselessness. He paused, staring at me with a twisted smile. Teach your daughter again, Marilla. Nobody loses 4 pregnancies in a row. Maybe she did it on purpose. Those words were like a razor blade. They did not just slice into my heart. They ripped open Calla's unhealed wounds. I heard her breath catch sharply, as if she had just been punched in the chest. 4 miscarriages, 4 unbearable times, she had called me sobbing into the phone, her voice fractured and broken, whispering that she had lost the children she would never be able to hold in her arms. Each time I could only clutch the phone, desperately helpless from afar, trying to soothe her with words that felt painfully empty. And now Sutton dared to stand here and accuse her of doing it on purpose. I clenched my fist so hard my nails dug deep into my palm, blood rushing hot to my face. He had crossed a line I could never forgive. I pulled my phone from my coat pocket. My hand trembled, but I forced my fingers to quickly dial the nearest police station. I am calling the cops. I said, my voice cold as ice, though inside I was a hurricane of fury. A report will be filed. You will answer to the law. I emphasized each word like I was carving them into the air itself, making certain every person in that room understood I was not bluffing. In that moment, I realized this night was no longer just about survival. It had become one of those revenge stories you never forget, the kind that mark a turning point in a family's history. Sutton froze. The wine bottle slipped from his hand, clattering onto the hardwood floor, red liquid spilling and staining the expensive rug. Panic flashed across his eyes, though he tried desperately to regain his mask of superiority. You would not dare, he shouted, but his voice wavered, betraying the fact that he had not expected me to go this far. Vernon, who had been watching with his cold, judicial expression, stepped forward. Adjusting his tie, his deep, gravelly voice boomed with authority. You have no idea who you are, challenging Miss Marilla, he declared. I have spent my entire life on the judge's bench. I have seen the worst humanity has to offer. Do you really think a simple phone call will make us tremble? His eyes were sharp as knives, his tone a reminder that the Delmere family was not easily shaken. But I did not back down. I had seen my daughter shivering in the freezing dark, and nothing, not even Vernon's power, would silence me now. From the table, Neve crossed her arms and let out a mocking smile. Go ahead, make the call, Miss Marilla, she taunted. Let us see who they believe, a crazy old woman or a respected family like ours. You really think the police will take your side? Her venomous laugh echoed through the room, confident that I would fail. On the couch, Calla tugged weakly at my sleeve, her voice trembling in a whisper. "Mom, please do not do it. I just want peace." Her red eyes, brimming with fear, pleaded silently, telling me she was terrified that things would only get worse. I looked at her, my chest aching so deeply it was hard to breathe. I knew she was scared of the Delmire's retaliation, scared of more humiliation, piling upon the pain she already carried. But I also knew that if I stopped now, Calla would remain trapped in this prison of cruelty forever. I squeezed her fragile hand, tightly trying to pass some of my strength into her bones. "You do not have to be afraid," I whispered, steady but firm. "I will protect you. I promise." I lifted her into my arms, snow falling from her clothes onto the rug like pieces of a shattered dream. I ignored the Delmire's scornful glares and their muttered threats. All I knew in that moment was that I had to get her out of that house, out of that cage of cruelty where she had been locked far too long. As I turned toward the door, I caught sight of Ellison through the fogged glass. He stood on the porch, his hand resting firmly on his radio, his eyes burning with a hidden fire, ready to act at any moment. I gave him a slight nod, just enough to let him know I was ready for the fight. Ellison nodded back firmly, his hands still gripping the radio, like a solemn promise that he would stand by me no matter what. I walked out without looking back. Behind me, I could hear Corliss shouting at the housekeeper to clean the spilled wine staining the rug. I heard Sutton slam his hand furiously on the table, muttering a curse under his breath. Then Vernon's deep, angry voice echoed across the room as he called someone on the phone. All those sounds cut into me like arrows piercing my back, but I refused to let them slow me down. I carried Calla to my small apartment near the National Training Center, where I had lived for years as a coach. It was not fancy, just a modest living room with an old couch, a simple kitchen tucked into the corner, and a few fading family photos decorating the walls. But to me, it was a safe place, a space where I could finally shield my girl from the Delmire's cruelty and the merciless cold. I took Calla into her room and gently settled her on the bed. She was still shivering, even though I had wrapped her in my thickest coat. I dug through the closet until I found an old sweater, pulled it over her frail frame, and then prepared a mug of hot cocoa, its sweet aroma spreading through the chilly air like comfort itself. "Drink this, sweetheart," I whispered, placing the mug carefully into her hands. But she only stared at it blankly, her eyes hollow, as though she did not believe she deserved even a single bit of warmth or care. My phone rang suddenly, cutting through the heavy silence. It was Ellison. His voice was steady, strong, carrying the weight of conviction. "Miss Marilla, I just filed the initial report at the station, but the Delmires will not go down easily. They have influence, and you know that. I am ready to testify as a witness if you need me." I felt the determination in his tone, a small but unwavering flame that refused to be extinguished. Ellison, my old student, the boy who once stood in the dojo with bright eyes and boundless energy, was now standing by me in a different kind of fight. "Help me prepare Ellison," I said, my voice brief but filled with gratitude. "This could be a long battle. I got it, Coach. I am here," he replied without hesitation. The next morning, I took Calla to a therapist in downtown Boise. Dr. Marjorie Holt, an older woman with a kind, attentive gaze, welcomed us into her cozy office. After a long talk with Calla, she turned to me, her voice heavy and sorrowful. "She is suffering from severe depression, Miss Marilla. 4 miscarriages combined with constant humiliation from her in-laws have crushed her confidence. She needs rest treatment and, above all, a sense of safety. I nodded slowly, my heart tightening. Deep down, I had known Calla was not okay, but hearing it spoken so plainly by the therapist was like another knife to my chest. I looked at her curled up in the chair, her hands clasped tightly together, and blamed myself for not being there sooner. That afternoon, Ellison stopped by the apartment out of uniform, carrying a bag of fruit and some old cookbooks. He set them gently on the table in front of Calla, hesitating before speaking. "I know you like cooking," he said quietly. "I thought maybe starting small, like a pie or some chicken noodle soup, might help you feel a little better." His voice was gentle, but I saw the worry etched deeply into his eyes. Calla lowered her head, clutching the hem of her blouse tightly, and murmured, "Thanks, but I do not think I can do anything anymore." Her words pierced my chest like a sharp needle. Ellison's face fell for a moment, but he did not push her. He simply nodded quietly, leaving the bag on the table before turning to me. "Miss Marilla, whatever you need, just say it. I have got your back." That night, after Calla finally drifted into uneasy sleep, I sat alone at the kitchen table under the dim light. Surrounded by scattered papers, I heard a faint noise outside. A moment later, a thick envelope slid under the door, silent as a threat cloaked in shadow. I opened it slowly. Inside was a handwritten note, the letters jagged and messy. "Do not mess with the Delmere family if you do not want to end up as miserable as your daughter. Give up." My blood boiled as I read those words. I crumpled the paper tightly in my hand and hurled it into the trash, the sound of it hitting the bin, breaking the silence like a gunshot. That threat did not frighten me. It only fueled me. They thought I would back down. They were wrong. That same night, I began organizing every shred of proof. I had bank receipts, messages with my notes of love, every bit of evidence showing that I had always tried to support Calla, even though Sutton and his family had squandered most of it. Every paper was also a memory, the times Calla had called me, her voice shaking, saying she wanted to buy something for the house only for Sutton to sneer that it was not needed. I gripped my pen so hard it nearly snapped. I had trusted Sutton once. I thought he would protect my daughter. Instead, he had treated her like a tool, and when she was no longer useful, he discarded her without mercy. Calla stirred in her sleep and woke up in the middle of the night. She stumbled out of her room, her legs trembling beneath her, and saw me still at the table, buried in a mountain of papers, my eyes heavy with exhaustion, but wide awake with fear. Mom Calla whispered, her fragile voice breaking apart. "I am scared. I am scared they will do something to you." I looked up and saw her red eyes swollen and haunted, and felt my heart being squeezed until I could barely breathe. I rose to my feet, walked to her, and wrapped my arms tightly around her, feeling her fragile body pressed against me. "You do not have to be afraid," I said firmly, even though inside I was nothing but a tangled knot of nerves. "From now on, I will be the one who protects you from everything. I promise." I led Calla gently back to her bed, staying by her side, until she finally drifted into a shallow, uneasy sleep. But sleep refused to come to me. I returned to the kitchen table, where the dim lamp burned above my scattered papers. I kept sorting through every document, making lists of everything that needed to be done. I picked up the phone and called an old lawyer friend who had once helped me with a complicated case tied to the Taekwondo team. He promised to look into it, but his warning was sharp. The Delmeres have a lot of pull in Boise, Miss Marilla. They know people in the courts. Get ready for a long, brutal fight. I nodded, though he could not see me. "I know," I said softly, "but I am not stopping." The weeks spent preparing the case felt like an endless nightmare. Night after night, under the faint glow of the lamp in my small apartment, I reviewed page after page, bank receipts, medical records, old messages. Each number and word was cold evidence of how I had tried to support my daughter. Each file was also a painful reminder of everything Calla had endured. Finally, the first day of the trial arrived, and I felt as though I were stepping once again onto a taekwondo mat for the fight of my life. Calla and I entered the Boise courthouse. The morning chills seeped through my thick coat. I held her hand, feeling her icy fingers trembling in my palm. Her eyes were swollen and red dark circles beneath them, telling of sleepless nights. She kept her head bowed low, as if she wanted to hide from every stare. I stood tall, forcing myself to be her rock, even though inside I was shaking just as much. "I am here," I whispered, squeezing her hand gently. She nodded weakly, but her empty eyes revealed she had surrendered her fight long ago. The Delmer family was already seated early. Sutton, dressed sharply in a gray suit, carried himself with the smugness of a man who thought he owned the room. Before the trial even started, he adjusted his tie and shot us a scornful glance. Beside him sat Vernon, moving slowly, but with eyes sharp as blades, flashing a confident smile like he already knew the outcome. In the family's row, Corliss and Neve sat primly dressed with elegance, whispering occasionally and throwing us cutting looks dripping with hostility. I felt their contempt in every glance, every whisper, every small gesture. But I forced myself to remain calm, reminding myself this day was not about me, it was about Calla. Ellison was there too, seated in the spectator section in his police uniform. He gave me a slight nod, his steady gaze filled with resolve, like a silent promise that he would not abandon us. His presence steadied me, reminding me that I was not alone, that someone had been there from that terrible Christmas Eve to this very moment. I nodded back silently, thanking him with all my heart. The trial began. My lawyer, Mr. Noble, rose and presented every piece of evidence clearly and firmly. He showed the bank transfers I had sent Calla over the years, proving beyond doubt that I had always tried to support her, even though most of that money had ended up swallowed by Sutton's hands. He then presented Calla's medical records, accompanied by detailed notes from Dr. Marjorie Holt describing her battle with deep depression. After 4 miscarriages and relentless insults from her husband's family, Calla did not just suffer physically. Mr. Noble said, his voice thick with controlled emotion. She was emotionally destroyed. They treated her as an outsider in her own home. I turned to look at Calla. Her head was bowed, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, like she was struggling to hold herself together and swallow all the pain that should never have been hers. I wanted to rise from my seat, to run and hug her, to shield her from every cruel word in that courtroom. But I knew I had to stay seated, to let the lawyer do his job, to trust the fight was not mine alone. Then the young attorneys for the Delmer family rose, their tailored black suits gleaming, their voices dripping with confidence. One of them spoke with icy authority. Calla is just faking illness to be coddled. The Delmer family gave her everything, shelter, food, every need met. But she never held up her end of the deal. She failed as a wife. Those words struck me like a slap across the face. Faking, coddled. My blood boiled. My fists clenched so tightly, my nails dug crescents into my palms. Then they called a witness. Fernley, the Delmere's former housekeeper, took the stand. Her eyes darted nervously, her voice trembling as she spoke. Miss Calla was lazy, she said. She would lock herself in her room most of the day, neglecting the house. I had to do everything. Her words echoed in the chamber, feeding the lies. Cooking, cleaning, those words echoed in my ears, and I could not believe what I was hearing. Calla, the same woman who had lovingly prepared every meal, who had baked homemade pies, just to please the entire family, now being branded as lazy. I shot to my feet, unable to hold back. You are lying. Calla was never like that. The judge, a middle-aged man with a stern face, slammed his gavel hard and said coldly, "Silence, please. This is a courtroom." I sank back into my seat, my heart racing so fast it felt like I could not breathe. My eyes drifted toward Vernon. He smiled faintly, a smug curl of his lips, then gave the judge a subtle nod. An invisible thread between them chilled my skin to the bone. Something was wrong. I felt it clearly in my gut. They had planned this day carefully, and I was nothing but a pawn in their chess game. Calla stayed hunched over her trembling hands, gripping the edge of her chair so tightly her knuckles turned white. I looked to the back row. Ellison sat rigid, his jaw clenched, his fists tight against his knees, like he was forcing himself to stay contained. Mr. Noble, our lawyer, pressed forward, his voice steady and strong. "We would like to present key evidence." He announced a recording from Christmas Eve, capturing the Delmere family's insults and psychological abuse toward Calla. He pressed play, and the courtroom filled with damning voices. Sutton's voice boomed cold and cruel. "She is just faking depression to dodge her duties." Then Corliss's dripping with disdain. "A woman who cannot have kids, even if she eats well, is useless." And then Neve's sarcastic and sharp. "She cannot even manage to give birth." The courtroom fell silent, broken only by faint whispers rippling through the crowd. I looked at Calla. She shrank back, her whole body curling in as if those words were stabbing her all over again. But the Delmere's lawyer leapt to his feet, objecting loudly. "That recording is illegal. It was made without consent. It violates privacy rights." The judge nodded, his voice dry and dismissive. "The recording is inadmissible." I felt the ground open beneath me. My hand clutched the chair desperately to keep from collapsing. The recording, the clearest proof of the Delmere's cruelty, thrown out on a technicality. Murmurs filled the room. Some gasped in disbelief. Others shook their heads confused. I looked at Ellison. His head was bowed, fists trembling against his knees. Calla hid her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking as she tried to hold back tears. I wanted to lose it, to rush the judge's bench and demand justice, but I knew deep down justice did not live in this room. Vernon sat calmly, his gaze arrogant, like he had already known this would happen. I squeezed Calla's hand, trying to pass her my strength, even though I felt defeated myself. After a week of grueling trial days, the final verdict arrived. I sat in the Boise courthouse, holding Calla's trembling hand, her cold fingers locked in mine. All week I had tried to stay strong, but every night back in my small apartment, my heart had ached with anguish and helplessness. Calla sat beside me now, her eyes red from endless nights without sleep, her face pale as if life itself had been drained out of her. I gripped her hand tighter, trying to pass her courage, though I was trembling too. Sutton strode into the room, adjusting his tie with casual arrogance, like it was just another day at the office. Corliss. His mother smoothed her dress and sat upright. Her lips painted a deep red. A confident smile etched on her face as if she already knew the outcome. Neve, in a flashy outfit, threw us a scornful look. Vernon stood behind Sutton, imposing his hard gaze, a clear reminder that the Delmere family always believed they controlled everything. Ellison was in the spectator section, still in his police uniform. His eyes were steady, but they could not hide his worry. He gave me a slight nod, a silent promise he would remain by our side no matter what. I nodded back, grateful beyond words for his presence. Then the judge, the same middle-aged man with his expressionless face, entered. A chill ran down my spine. The air grew heavy, the entire courtroom bracing for an inevitable verdict. The judge spoke, his voice dry and firm. The court grants the divorce request of the plaintiff, Calla Grafton, and the defendant, Sutton Delmere. Those words sparked a tiny ray of hope inside me. Calla broke into silent tears, streams running down her cheeks. I squeezed her hand tightly, urging her to stay calm and listen. The divorce was what I had fought for, what I wanted for Calla, a chance to escape the Delmere's cruel cage. But deep inside I knew this ruling was not the end. The judge continued, his voice monotonous, like he was merely reading another report. However, the court does not recognize the claims of domestic abuse due to insufficient legal evidence. As for assets, since Sutton Delmere contributed more to the upkeep of the marriage, the court awards him the majority of the shared property. Those words slammed into me like a hammer to the chest. I froze my breath, catching in my throat. No recognition of domestic abuse, insufficient evidence. I remembered the Christmas Eve recording, Sutton Corliss and Neve's cruel words discarded on a technicality. I thought of Calla's medical records, the bank receipts, all of it twisted and distorted by the Delmere's lawyers into evidence against us. And then it struck me like lightning. Vernon, with his long years as a judge and his deep ties in the judicial system, had rigged it all. I looked at him, saw him tilt his head slightly, that smug smile still etched on his lips. It was all fixed, manipulated from the very beginning. Calla and I were nothing more than pawns in their elaborate game. In that instant, I realized this was not just about justice, denied. It was the beginning of the revenge story that I would carry forward, a reckoning they never saw coming. I could not hold back any longer. I shot to my feet, my voice breaking with rage and raw pain. This is so unfair. This is not justice. My shout echoed through the chamber, silencing every whisper. Calla grabbed my hand, her eyes wide with panic, but I refused to stop. You saw how they treated my daughter. You heard what she endured, and you still dare to say there was no abuse. You dare take everything from her. A guard approached, his voice firm but rehearsed. Ma'am, please sit down, or I will have to ask you to leave. I glared at him, then at the judge, who sat unmoving, his face blank, as though my words meant absolutely nothing. I sank back into my seat, my hands trembling violently, feeling the entire world crumble beneath me. Sutton turned, his eyes locking onto mine. He flashed a mocking smile, adjusting his tie like a man savoring victory. Corliss and Neve leaned toward each other, giggling under their breath, making certain I heard them. That laughter cut through me like a knife stabbing deeper than any wound. Vernon nodded slowly, his gaze calm but arrogant, like this was just another case he had manipulated from the shadows. I looked at them one by one, my blood boiling hotter with every face. They had not just stolen Calla's justice. They had stolen my faith in a system I had once believed was fair. Beside me, Calla covered her face with her hands, her body shaking, her muffled sobs tearing me apart. I wanted to hug her, to promise her that everything would be okay, but no words came. My throat was closed tight with despair. The judge's words echoed in my skull like a sentence carved in stone, not only for Calla, but for me as well. From the back row, Ellison stood abruptly, his glare fixed on the Delmirs. I saw veins bulging in his arms, his fists clenched so tightly it seemed he was holding back a storm of rage. I signaled him to stay calm, though deep inside I wanted to scream, to break everything in that courtroom apart. The judge slammed his gavel again, his voice sharp and cold. Order. The session is over. Everyone may leave. The gavel's sound was a final period to the case, but for me it was the beginning of a new kind of pain. People began to rise. Papers, shuffled voices murmured. But I stayed seated, holding Calla tightly, feeling her trembling shoulders and hearing her sobs that shattered me from within. I wanted to comfort her, but the words caught in my throat, powerless against the enormity of her pain. The unjust ruling had not only stripped Calla of her rightful assets, it had ripped away the last shred of my belief that the system would ever protect her. Sutton sauntered over his posture, dripping with smugness like a conqueror savoring his victory. He leaned close to my ear, whispering mockingly, "See, Marilla, I told you not to fight me. You are just a useless old woman." He flashed a crooked smile, his eyes gleaming with triumph, then turned away, leaving us as if we were not worth a single second more of his time. His words were gasoline on the fire, already raging inside me. My blood surged, my veins pulsing hot. I clenched my fist so hard it hurt my body taut, like a drawn bow ready to snap. I wanted to lunge, to smash my fist into that arrogant face, to finally make him pay for everything he had done to my daughter. After decades as a Taekwondo coach, I had learned discipline and restraint. But in that moment, every barrier inside me crumbled. I took a step forward, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it would shatter my chest, ready to do something I knew I might regret forever. But Ellison rushed in front of me, his eyes blazing, like fire lips, pressed tight, his fist clenched so hard it looked ready to shatter. He seemed on the edge of unleashing it all on Sutton. I saw my own fury mirrored in him, an uncontainable outrage boiling over at the injustice we had both witnessed. The courtroom buzzed instantly, voices rising in alarm. "Are they going to fight?" someone whispered. A cop throwing punches in court. Some spectators pulled out phones, camera flashes sparking across the tense air. A journalist in the corner raised his camera, his hungry eyes glittering eager for a scandal to capture. Sutton turned, startled for just a heartbeat, but quickly regained his swagger. He smirked coldly. "Go ahead, hit me. I will make sure you lose everything. Who do you think you are?" Just a low-life cop. He stepped closer, taunting, his chin raised arrogantly, so sure Ellison would not dare to touch him. Ellison's fist trembled, his breathing heavy eyes burning red with fury. I knew in that moment he could do something irreversible. Suddenly, Calla broke free from my arm, stumbling forward. She ran to Ellison and clung to his arm, desperately sobbing, her broken voice tearing through the silence. "No, please, do not do it. I do not want you or Mom to become violent like him. I just want peace. I just want to keep living." Her cries sliced through the air, silencing the entire courtroom. I saw tears stream down Calla's face, her thin hands gripping Ellison like he was her last anchor of safety. Ellison froze his chest, heaving, his fiery eyes slowly dimming. His fist trembled for a moment longer, rigid, then finally loosened, falling limply to his side. He bowed his head, lips pressed tight, struggling to cage the storm raging inside him. Camera clicks, echoed flashes, capturing the image, Calla clinging to Ellison Sutton, standing smug and unrepentant in front of them. Some in the room, perhaps unaware of the entire case, began to cry softly. A murmur of sorrow spread like a wave. I saw a woman wiping her tears, a man shaking his head in visible grief. But the Delmirs remained unmoved. Corliss and Neve whispered to each other, their lips curled into cold smiles. Vernon nodded slightly, his authoritative air unbroken, as if everything was still firmly under his control. The judge slammed his gavel hard, his voice slicing through the room. Order. If this disruption continues, I will have the guards clear the room. The sharp crack of the gavel was a warning, snapping everyone back to harsh reality. I stepped forward, quickly gathered Calla into my arms, and hugged her tightly. She kept crying, her frail body trembling in my embrace like a child lost in a storm. Ellison stood beside us, head bowed, lips tight, his posture heavy with guilt, as though he blamed himself for not doing more. I placed a hand gently on his shoulder, nodding in gratitude, letting him know I understood, and that I was thankful he was there. Sutton adjusted his tie smirk, tugging at his lips, then turned and walked away, his steps heavy with triumph. Corliss and Neve followed close behind their cold laughter, trailing like knives, piercing deeper into my chest. The room slowly emptied until it was just the three of us, me, Calla, and Ellison, bound together by the same bitter lump lodged in our throats. I hugged Calla tighter, feeling her weak breath against my shoulder. Mom, she whispered, her voice breaking apart. I do not want to fight anymore. I am so tired. Can we just go home? Those words shattered my heart. I wanted to tell her everything would be okay, that I would keep fighting, but my throat locked and no words could come. I led Calla out of the courtroom. Ellison, walking silently beside us, his gaze steady and protective. The faint Boise sunlight streamed through the tall windows, but it could not warm the heaviness in my chest. I knew today's ruling was not just a loss, it was a declaration of war. The Delmirs may have won in court, but I swore they would not win in Calla's life. I looked at her, her red eyes still brimming with tears, but holding the tiniest spark inside a flicker of hope, however fragile. For that spark, I vowed I would never give up. In the days after the trial, Boise stirred with an undercurrent of tension. Local news stations began reporting. Bold headlines screamed from the front pages, Delmir trial justice bought. Reading those words, my heart pounded fiercely, like they had given voice to our pain, Calla's and mine. On social media, the video of Calla clinging to Ellison inside the courtroom spread rapidly. The image of my daughter, eyes red, voice breaking, begging Ellison not to resort to violence, touched countless hearts. Comments flooded the posts with outrage. The Delmirs think they can control everything. Calla deserves better than this. Sitting in our small apartment reading those words, I felt a fragile comfort, even though the court had cruelly turned its back on us. The community's voice was finally beginning to side with Calla. The Delmirs, despite their hollow legal victory, were beginning to feel the real cost of their corruption. I heard whispers ripple among Vernon's old colleagues, rumors spreading like wildfire that he had used his influence to twist justice for his own family's gain. Sutton, already dubbed by the press as the lawyer of injustice, became the relentless target of online criticism. The prestige the family had flaunted so arrogantly was crumbling fast like a sandcastle collapsing beneath a relentless wave. I did not revel in their downfall, but I could not deny feeling a faint sliver of justice not from the cold, indifferent courts, but from the voice of the people. I brought Calla to live with me in my modest apartment, lit by the soft yellow glow of old lamps' walls adorned with family photos that spoke of better times. Each morning, I rose early to make her breakfast, sometimes golden pancakes drizzled with maple syrup, other times simple scrambled eggs and toast. Calla would sit slowly at the table, cradling a steaming mug of hot tea, her eyes drifting to the window where faint sunlight slipped between Boise's rooftops. On some mornings, I saw silent tears roll down her cheeks like raindrops, but I also knew, little by little, my daughter was beginning to heal. Every day she spoke a little more, her eyes slightly less empty than before. I never pushed her. I simply stayed by her side, a mother determined to shield her child from any storm. Ellison soon became an important presence in our lives. He stopped by, often sometimes, bringing a small bouquet of poinsettias, other times carrying a box of warm donuts from the corner bakery. Each visit lit up Calla's eyes like his presence itself was medicine for her weary soul. One quiet afternoon, Ellison, a bit nervous, handed Calla a small box. Inside was a keychain shaped like a taekwondo uniform, the very same symbol I had once taught him and so many other students. "You do not have to be strong all at once," he said softly but firmly. "You can start over, little by little, the same way Miss Marilla once did." Calla held the keychain, frozen in her hand, her eyes shimmering with emotion. She pressed her lips tightly, holding back tears, then slowly nodded. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice small, but filled with fragile sincerity. I watched silently from across the room, feeling a weight I had carried for years finally begin to lift from my chest. For so long, Calla had been belittled, demeaned, and called useless. Now, at last, someone was showing her she was valuable, not for what she could do, but for who she was. I turned away, wiping a tear from my cheek, not wanting Calla to see me vulnerable. One golden evening, as the sunset bathed the apartment in warm light, Calla sat across from Ellison on the couch. Her head was bowed, her hands twisting nervously at the edge of her sweater, her voice trembling as she finally spoke. "Ellison, I might never be able to have children, if that disappoints you." She trailed off, terrified that her words might ruin everything. I stood in the kitchen, pretending to wash dishes, but my heart stopped beating, waiting for his reply. He smiled a steady, warm smile and took her hands, looking deeply into her eyes. "I do not need that, Calla. You are already my family." Those words washed through the room like a gust of warm air, melting the cold that had lingered far too long inside my chest. I heard them with a lump rising in my throat, my eyes blurring with unshed tears. For years, Calla had been humiliated, branded as a failed wife simply because she could not bear children. And now, here was someone telling her she was enough, that she was worthy of love just for being herself. I turned my face away, letting the tears fall silently, my heart swelling with gratitude too large for words. When Easter arrived, I took Calla by the hand and we walked through Boise's main square, just as we had when she was a little girl, skipping happily down bright streets. The square was alive with children's laughter and the smell of fresh-baked pies rising from food stalls. Calla wore a light sweater, her hair tied up, and for the very first time in months, I saw her smile. A radiant spring sun smile. "Mom," she said softly, her voice full of wistful warmth. "I miss these days. I miss when you taught me to make apple pie, when you told me about your taekwondo matches." I smiled and squeezed her hand tightly. "I miss them too, sweetheart, and I will always be here to make more memories with you." as we sat together on a wooden bench watching children play by the fountain. A simple but profound truth washed over me like sunlight breaking through clouds. Justice in courtrooms can be twisted, bought and sold by power and money, but the justice of the heart, love, respect, resilience that is untouchable, unshakable, and forever beyond the reach of cruelty. Calla, though she had lost so much, was slowly finding herself again, day by day, step by step. And I, a mother who once felt powerless, discovered that my greatest strength was not in the punches I threw in a taekwondo ring, but in the endless love I carried for my daughter. Ellison showed up one afternoon with a small paper bag of warm churros. He handed one to Calla, and for the first time in months, I heard her laugh, a soft, genuine laugh that carried the sound of hope. They sat together chatting like old friends who had weathered different storms but still found light in each other's company. I watched quietly from across the room, my heart swelling with gratitude. Calla may never forget the scars the Delmirs carved into her life, but she was learning how to move forward, how to value herself, and how to open her heart only to those who truly deserved her. And me at 65, after fighting so many battles, both inside and outside the ring, I finally understood that the fight for my daughter's happiness had been the most meaningful of them all. This story is fictional, yet it draws deeply from real-life experiences that so many endure. Names and places have been changed to protect those involved. We share it not to condemn, but with the hope that someone listening might pause and reflect on how many mothers suffer silently in their own homes. Some of these truths are echoed in communities everywhere, even in the countless Reddit revenge stories where people find courage to speak out after years of silence. So I am genuinely curious, if you were standing in my shoes, what would you do? Would you remain silent, convincing yourself it is peace, or would you dare to face it all, to reclaim your voice and your dignity? I want to know what you think, because every story is like a candle that can light another person's path forward. As I reflect now, I truly believe that courage, even in its smallest form, leads to brighter days. It may not erase the scars of the past, but it can shape a future where hope has a place to grow. Please share your own thoughts, feelings, or experiences in the comments below. I would love to hear them and learn from them. And if this story resonates with you, do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss another story that might speak to your heart. At the end of this video, you will see links to one of our most cherished stories, ones that many viewers have said touch them deeply. I hope you take the time to watch because they carry lessons just as powerful as this one. Thank you for supporting us, for listening until the end, and for walking this journey with me. I look forward to seeing you again in the next story.